Good morning, Bangladesh.
Okay, page 57. Right, having explained the Inyan of Sfir Sa'imah, having explained the Inyan of each Midah being miskalel in each Midah being incorporated in each Midah. And when we brought an example of Chesed, we went through the Midah of Chesed mitzad the Nefesh Elokis and Chesed mitzad the Nefesh Bahamis. Right? Chesed shebechesed until Malchus shebechesed. They're getting very rowdy over there, you know. I don't know what's going on.
We're preparing for the summer program.
Okay, could be.
They're warming up.
There we go. So now the Rebbe is going to answer the question that we asked at the beginning of the Maimer. And the question was, why does the pasuk say Usfartem lechem mimachras Shabbos? Why doesn't it say Usfartem lechem mimachras Pesach, which is what it means? And Rashi on Chumash says mimachras Shabbos means mimachras Yom Tov, and we know that there were problems in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash with the tzedekим and the baitusim that took it literally and said that means you start counting Sfiras Omer, Meitzi, Shabbos, Chol HaMoed, Pesach. This year they would have been 6 days behind us, right? We were counting 7 on. It wasn't. They wouldn't have even started on Pesach this year, right? They would have started Meitzi Shvi Shel Pesach, because there wasn't a Shabbos Chol HaMoed this year, right? Okay. So finally, after much argument, the tzedekим and the baitusim agreed with the rabbinic position, and the fight calmed down. But it was not pleasant. Okay, so what's Sfir Sa'imah? Sfir Sa'imah is the state in time in between two tremendous revelations of godliness, Pesach and Matan Torah. And Sfir Sa'imah is the gap in between where our Veda from below takes us from a place of experiencing the revelation of Atzmus in Mitzrayim to internalizing or experiencing that in a much deeper way by Matan Torah. Okay? Fine. So why Machras Shabbos? I want to go over, we're going to start, we read probably, I don't know, to about 8-10 lines above the end of the paragraph, something like that. But we're going to start closer to the top again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hine, Mishum Zeh. We're going to go over Machras Shabbos again. This time we'll do it slowly. Last time we did it very quickly. It was already after 8:30 when we started. Those are the things I remember. It makes tremendous emotional scars. Hine, Mishum Zeh, hu omer mimachras Shabbos. Because of this it says mimachras Shabbos. Tehine, Yomim Yutzru. The Eibishter created days. In other words, Zman is a nivra. That itself is a bit of a chiddush. Right? The source of that in Chassidus is the Maggid. The Maggidim is rich. He talks about time as a created being, created reality as a being. Right? Created reality. Okay, now, basically, and Chazal talk about it also when Chazal refer to Olam, Shana, Nefesh. 3 different states of reality. Olam, world, space. Shana, literally year, time. And Nefesh, life that exists within the context of that space and time. Right? Sheklolos ishtashlos, that the basic reality of the created worlds, now it includes Atzilus, but say that we'll talk about it in terms of creation, Bria, Yetzirah, Asi, and obviously most specifically in terms of Elam Asi, our world. Sheklolos ishtashlos hu bezman hamokim, bahagbola dafka. What did the Eibishter create? He created time and space. But that time and space, of course, is limited. There's metaphysical time, whatever that looks like. And there's physical time, which also is hard to figure out what that looks like, but at least we experience its passage, right? We notice that things change, and we talked about that on Thursday, that time is the measure of change. And we measure time, interestingly enough, by the movement of bodies in space. There's no way of measuring time mitzad itself. What is it exactly? Right? Okay. Dihine, klolos ishtashlos, the basic reality of created reality, basic nature of created reality, is eisgestellt geworden, is revealed, the kedima ve'ichur, Now, Kedima ve'ichur is before and after. Now, before and after, interestingly enough, can be expressed in space and in time, as we talked about, again, quickly on Thursday. Now we have more time. Kedima ve'ichur. We mentioned on Thursday also. What's the source of that? Meaning, what is it in the whole process of creation and the levels of Elokus, obviously far beyond creation? What event, so to speak, brings into existence the possibility of Kedima ve'ichur, lower down in time and space? That's after Tzimtzum Rishon, when the Kav, that shaft of light, is Beikeya. It says it's Beikeya. It bursts into the Halal, the so-called empty space. Not empty, right? Just the revelation of Gvul, the revelation of limitation, right? So the Kav bursts into that. And what's the image of a Kav? Well, it has a top and a bottom. Light itself, well, where does light begin? I don't know. It doesn't begin or end. It's just there. The idea of describing light as a shaft helps us understand that it could also be relevant to the notion of beginning and end. Beginning and end in space, the top of the shaft, so to speak, the bottom, and also in time, which the top, I assume, came first as the light emanates down. Okay, fine. So that's the Rebbe's not talking about that here, but that you should know that. That's the source of the idea of Kedima ve'ichur. But obviously there are other things that go into that. And the next thing is mati v'loy mati, which we didn't really talk about very much, right? Just men. Now mati v'loy mati, touching and not touching, right? Reaching and not reaching. What's mati v'loy mati? So in Avodah, you've probably heard of the idea of a ritzay v'shev. Ritzay v'shev is, and this is ultimately the basic yesod, the basic foundation of all of Vedas is Ritzay v'shev, right? Things that elevate us out of reality, so to speak, and aspects that bring us back into reality, right? So, and the movement of our soul is constantly Ritzay v'shev. Our soul longs on one level to transcend Eilam Hazeh. On the other hand, it realizes that its basic Avodah is in Eilam Hazeh. We're about to read Parshas Achrei. In Achrei, what's it talking about? The passing of the Shnei B'nei Aaron. What was their problem? Ritzay without Shev. They went up, but they couldn't come back. They missed the ultimate point. I have to say that what they did was quite astounding, right? But that being said, what they did is not the ultimate in Avodah. We don't want to go up and not come back. We want to be here. Right? Even Moshe Rabbeinu had the, how he did this, I don't know, because of what was going on down there. He left the loftiest places of godly revelation. He's sitting having a charusa with the Eibishter, learning Torah, learning all about the Torah, and he hears about Chet Egel and decides to go back down into Eilam Hazeh. I mean, why wouldn't he just say, forget it, what do I need that for? I'll stay here. But he realizes, no, it's ultimately Shev. It's all about coming back also. And the Iker is the Shev. The real bittul is the Shev. The Ritzay is incredible spiritual pleasure. The real bittul is to come back into the world, despite the fact that that might be challenging. Okay. And the Neshama experiences that movement constantly. That movement by the Eibishter is called Mati V'Loy Mati. That aspect of godliness, the Mitzad Echad is revealed, the Mitzad Echad is concealed. So to speak, the Eibishter creating and not creating, which we talked about last time, right? So there's a mati v'loy mati in creation, and that actually is what creates most simply what you and I call time, space. So there could be a certain existence of space, just create space, okay, but it would be static. Okay, but say there's static space, that's not such a problem. Static time, well, that means there's no time, basically. Right? So what's time all about? Movement, change. It's measuring change. It's producing change, measuring change. That's, which is the cart and which is the horse. Unclear. Okay. But time is all about change. Therefore, we talked about this on Thursday. What the simplest mushal for the understanding of Mechadish V'choyim Tamid Ma'aseh Bereishis, which is Mati V'lo Mati, that the world is constantly going from a state of yesh, creation, into a state of ayin, non-creation. Yesh, ayin, yesh, ayin. Every macro second, right? The world is going from a state of non-existence into existence, non-existence into existence, which is what allows for change. So it allows for it not to be a static picture, but rather a motion picture.
So in the cart and the horse, what, or chicken and egg, what are the two, what's the time
There's
and reality, or?
Does time measure change or create change, right? I mean, that, it does both, basically. We change, we change as time passes. Okay. But, so is it causing it? Well, yeah, on a certain level, right? Is it measuring it? Yeah, well, that's also true, right? Okay. But, and what was the mashal we brought? Who remembers the mashal? To understand the idea of the world going from a state of yesh into ayin, into yesh into ayin, into yesh into ayin. So glad I say these things. I'm going to have a cup of coffee while you guys think about this. L'chaim, baruch atah Adin Elohim melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvarecho. The coffee's better than your answer to my question. Okay, what's the mashal? Say that it's not that we always don't. You don't always remember a mashal once. You want to hear it once. That's why we say it over and over and over. The mashal that I again, the mashal could be digital video. I just don't know how it works. The mashal is 35 millimeter video because I do know how that works because you can see it, right? That 35 millimeter, what do they call it, of film? Something reel? No, but reel. Okay, that reel of film. So what is it? It's a picture, and then a space, and then another picture, then a space, then another picture, then a space. Okay. When you put those pictures past the light very, very quickly at just the right speed, so the image that you see on the wall or the screen or wherever the image is, that image is relatively seamless. What aren't you seeing? You aren't seeing the ayin in between each state of yesh. All you're seeing is the yesh. But in order for the yesh to change, right, there has to be a state of ayin in between each state of yesh. Now the difference between state 1 and state 2 is infinitesimal. I was doubting whether or not I could say that word right? Okay, very, very small, right? And as a matter of fact, if you were to look at the two, you probably couldn't notice the difference unless you were Columbo. He would notice the difference, but no one else could, right? Okay, so, just from my youth, right? Okay, so, what's making the change such that you see people moving on the screen? And interestingly enough, what was this all called when it began? It was called motion pictures, right? Because what you could see, and again, we talked about this on Thursday, what you could see fairly clearly in the old films, if you've ever seen them, is the jerkiness of it all, right? It's fairly jerky. So, you're not seeing each picture, but it's pretty obvious that it's another picture, because it wasn't as good as it is now. And now, again, with digital, it's just unbelievable. It's just seamless, completely seamless. Okay. Remember those books that you had as kids, where if you turn the pages, the stick men used to run across the page, right? Because each page was a slightly different picture of the stick man. Well, you probably loved those. I loved those books when I was a kid. They were a lot of fun, right? Sometimes it didn't work so right. Okay, say that. Right? So what is that? That's a state of yesh. In between each state of yesh, there's an invisible state of ayin. You don't see it, but there is a state of ayin. Now, in the book, you see it because there's a picture here and there's a picture here. Okay, but in the in real life, you don't see the ayin in between each state of yesh. But the world is constantly going from a state of yesh to ayin. That's how time works. Space doesn't. That's how space works also, but it doesn't. Theoretically, it doesn't have to work. It's more obvious why it's necessary in time. Space. Well, it's relatively static anyway, right? Now, of course, all the change is happening in space, right? So your hand is moving like that. But the ground is the ground, and theoretically, you could just take a picture of it and it would look the same, right? Take a picture of a forest. Take a motion picture of a forest. A very slight difference as you watch for 10 seconds, right? Not a lot is happening. Yeah, you see a few trees move in the breeze, but basically the image is the same. Okay. But in all fairness, time can't work any other way, so to speak. Maybe the Rebbe can do whatever he wants, and he could do this without being machadish b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis, and without yesh turning it dayin and turning it. He can do whatever he wants, but this is the way he did it, and he did it this way because you and I can understand it this way. Okay, that's one of the reasons Chassidus brings is the why this, right? Because you and I can actually talk about it, which is uplifting. Okay, mati v'loy mati, shuhu inyan zmanim v'seder zmanim. So zman is the place in time where there's clear differentiation, because that's what zman's all about. What's seder zmanim? This we didn't talk about on Thursday. We just zipped right past it. Seder Zmanim is the level of time that exists mitzad Shem Havaya, as opposed to Zman being the level of time that exists by Shem Elokim. Shem Elokim is the name responsible for differentiation. That's why Shem Elokim is plural. That's why it's even conjugated in plurality, Elokim Kadoshim. Now that doesn't chas v'shalom mean holy gods. It means holy God. But that being said, that name of the Eibishter is a name that denotes the source of plurality, the ability of reality to be expressed in a way other than the essential oneness of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. What's that? Shem Elokim. Shem Elokim is the prism through which the one light of Shem Havaya shines. Therefore, the light is separated into different aspects. Okay? Plurality. The reality that he's chalkus, differentiation, the reality that we experience. So that's all a function of Shem Elokim. Shem Havaya is the or that's drawn down into those kelim. Shem Elokim is the source of kelim. Shem Havaya is the source of or. In Shem Havaya, time is one. There's no differentiation in time. And as a matter of fact, what is one of the explanations of the name Shem Havaya? Hoive Haya Hoive V'yiyeh. He was, he is, and he will be, all at once. That's Seder Zmanim. Okay? This is what we just sort of zipped right through on Thursday.
Hove Haya
Haya was, Hove is, Yehiyeh will be. Right? One of the pshatim in Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei contains all of them. Right? Also, that the Yud represents constancy, not future tense. Yud is generally future tense, but Yud can also be a state of constancy. The pasuk brought by the Alter Rebbe once in Shayichin V'Emunah and once in Tanya is Kacha Yaseh Iyov. Thus Iyov not will do, he does and will continue to do. He always does this. That's Ya'aseh. Oseh means he's doing it now. What's he going to be doing in 5 minutes? I don't know. Yaseh means he's doing it. He always does this. So Yud and then Kei Vav Kei can mean one of two things. In Tanya, the Rebbe talks about it mitzad Yud and then Hoveh. What's Hoveh? Present, a state of constant present. It's beyond past, future, present. So that's Seder Zmanim. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Right? That's what the Rebbe means when he says Seder Zmanim. The place where time is one. And that's actually Shabbos, and that's why that's a very, very lofty place in time, which we saw on Thursday. We're going to see again today, more slowly. Right? Okay. The other understanding of Yud Kei Vav Kei is he's constantly mehaveh, bringing into being, which is what we just talked about. Mati v'loy mati. Mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis. Yeshayin, Yeshayin, Yeshayin. He's constantly bringing the world into existence. Okay. The lachain, therefore, since time is also a created reality, it's also a function of Kedima V'ich, or it's also a function of Mati V'loy Mati. And down here in Zman, the differentiation is quite pronounced. In the level of Seder Zmanim, there's no differentiation, but still limited by the reality of time. The Lochein, which is hard for us to understand. The Lochein, Usfartem Lechem, in order that you can truly do the Avodah Usfartem Lechem, and what's that? Hainu Bidur Seder Ishtalshlus. the rectification of Seder Ishtalshelus, which we've explained in the whole Maimer, 7 midos, the source of Seder Ishtalshelus, the 7 midos of the Nefesh Bahamis in you, Ad lamata mata until the lowest level, Malchus Malchus Be'emek Tachas, and we'll see really the lowest level is Hoyd Shebahoyd. That's what I was going to explain when he starts explaining like Be'emer. Ein zem mitzad Seder Ishtalshelus li'esa mugbal. The rectification of Seder Ishtalshelus can't come from a level of Seder Ishtalshelus. It must come from a level above. We've said this so often, right? And the idea in Chassidus that you run into constantly. Ein ha'asir materis atzmai. The prisoner can't set himself free. Only someone not limited by being a prisoner can free the prisoner. What is it that allows you and I to illuminate and elevate Seder Ishtalshelus a level beyond Seder Ishtalshelus? Ela koyach al zehu mimachras haShabbos. It's from a level beyond Shabbos dafka, and that's why the pasuk says Usfartem lechem mimachras haShabbos. You're only going to be able to bring about a change in the reality of your nefesh habahamis if you tap into a level completely transcendent of the nefesh habahamis. Simply disciplining the nefesh habahamis will be good. Your behavior might be fine, but it's not going to bring about a real change in the nefesh habahamis. The dog is still a dog, even though he now knows to scratch at the door and go outside. He's still a dog. He's just a well-behaved dog. So he knows how to sit, he knows how to lie down, he knows how to stop barking when you tell him to stop barking. He's still a hund. Nothing happened. Oh, what if you want to take him ois hund? Well, okay, you and I can't do that, but obviously a force beyond nature would have to be revealed in order to take this dog out of his natural state of being a dog. Now, if you could do that, if you could turn the dog into a camel if you wanted to do that, that wouldn't be a problem. You and I can't do that, one.
Ice hunt?
Outside of being a hound. Not hound. Sorry.
No problem.
Just sounds better.
Ois hunt.
It's no longer a hund. Right? A hund is a hound, right? Which is a word that's not used very much in English, but that is what a dog is, right? Okay. He's a hound. So how do we change natural reality with a connection to a level beyond natural reality? I can't change nature with nature. That doesn't mean I can't change the behavior of nature, but I can't change the nature of it. What are we trying to do? Illuminate the Nefesh HaBahamis. So the Nefesh HaBahamis will now be something that's connected to the idea and the words the Rebbe gave us were B'chol Derechei Yadeu, in all your ways know Him. Meaning even your Nefesh HaBahamis is actively involved, mitzad itself, in a relationship with the Eibishter. Not simply being bottled to the Nefesh Elokis sometimes, right? But transformed, elevated. What's the power to do this? Humi machras Shabbos dafka from a level beyond Seder Ishtalshelus. Dine Shabbos. Now this is what we saw again. We saw this quickly on Thursday. We can go through it relatively quickly now. Except now we do have a little information that will help us understand this more. In the Shabbos will be in the context of time. Shabbos is Seder Hazmanim as opposed to Zman, meaning it is a level of time that's beyond the natural, the normal level of time, but it's still connected to time, just like Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is connected to time. It's the source of time. It's transcendent of time on a certain level, but it's defined in terms of time. Yud Kei Vav Kei, Haya Hoiva V'Yiyah. Well, what's that? Time. I'm defining it in terms of time. Even though it's on a certain level transcendent of time, but it's still connected to it. It's still connected to the world. Yud Kei Vav Kei is that level of godliness responsible for the Hishavus, for the bringing into being of the world. Okay, so it's shaykh to the world. Just like often when we talk about Seviv. Seviv is defined in terms of its relationship to the world. Seviv Kol Almin. There's levels of light that are completely beyond that. Now, we'll put them in the category of Seviv because all infinite light could be one in that sense. But there's levels of godliness that are not defined in terms of the world in any way, shape, or form. They're completely transcendent of the world. They have nothing to do with the world, so to speak. And then there's levels of transcendent godly reality that are part of the process of creating the world, right? Directly. So we'll say Seviv is that. Seviv Kol Almin. That's what we say about it. Therefore, it's affected by tzimtzum. So this is Zeischukas, we'll see it again. Or Seder is affected by tzimtzum to a certain degree. How? So to speak, there's a sign at the beginning of Seder Ishtalshalus, do not enter. That affects our Seder, right? I mean, this is a place of revealed or mamale, not a place of revealed or Seder. You're not revealed here. Okay. So that's limiting Seder? Yeah. That's what it does. Okay. We'll see that. And say it's Chukas already. Shabbos is the highest level of time. So we'll call that Seder Zmanim in this context. Before there's Zman. That's sanctified from all time. But it's still time. It's a higher level of time, but it's still shaykh to time. Meaning it's a level that is transcendent mitzad itself to the extent that it is beyond normal time, but it's kaima, but it exists within the context of time and is defined in the context of time. And what happens at the end of Shabbos? It ends in time. Yom Shekula Shabbos will be the revelation of something completely transcendent of all of that. But in the meantime, there's a level of 7. We haven't seen the level of 8. Shugam keminyan bizman, sheishis yomim also, b'yom shvi, Shabbos v'yinofash. Therefore, what do you have to touch in order to bring about a complete rectification of your nefesh habahamis? Your natural state, the level mimachras of Shabbos, beyond time. Amazing. Touch it, you have to touch nefesh al-kis, mamish. Mikev and shuinin shabazman. Shabbos, hine avshu zman de kedusha, even though it's a time of kedusha, we call mokem dayay lafkiyas atzma. She's able to extract herself from time. Actually, this is masculine. Right? He is able to extract himself from time. Aval ein bekeiche lafeich shtus delumazeh, but he can't transform the shtus delumazeh. He can't transform normal, regular, physical time. Because after all, what happens right after Shabbos? Yom Rishon. Yom Rishon happens again. And it's quite a fall for the neshama. So you have to do some things, you have to have a malka, you have to do some things in order to lessen the fall. V'lochen, hine k'shuoimer usfartem lechem, that's what we got to on Thursday. K'shuoimer usfartem lechem, hainu levader adoi metachas, you want to rectify until the lowest levels. Eimer al zemi machras of Shabbos has to come from a place beyond Shabbos. Even Shabbos can't do that. Shabbos can bring about a temporary state of upliftedness, but it doesn't change all of reality into a state of kedusha. It gives koyach, bracha, but it doesn't change it. V'lachein hine kishu eimer usfartem lechem hainu levader ad eimer tachas eimer al zeh. It says about this mimachras Shabbos. Hainu, what does that mean? Shekayach al zeh, the ability, the power, the potential to do this. Hu mimachras Shabbos dafka, a place beyond even the holiness of Shabbos. Shelamayli mi bechinas mikdash v'kaima. Now, if you were to write mimachras Yom Tif, that wouldn't mean enough, because what's mimachras Yom Tif? Shabbos. Shabbos is lamayli mi Yom Tif. So I might think Shabbos could do it. Shabbos can't do it. Only something even beyond Shabbos. What does this mean in Aveda? To touch our neshama. Aveda is all about connecting to the nefesh elokis, not simply disciplining the nefesh habahamis. Of course, I have to discipline the nefesh habahamis. Without disciplining the nefesh habahamis, nothing will work. Right? Can't stop smoking without stopping smoking. But what ultimately does this has to happen? The person has to turn into a non-smoker. He has to change completely. Okay. And he can do that over time. But that's all in Gashmis. In Ruchnius, in order to connect the Elokus, well, how do we connect the Elokus with our Nefesh Bahamis? Our Nefesh Bahamis naturally can't connect the Elokus mitzad itself. But it can if it's powered by the Nefesh Elokus. And you and I all have that. This thing called a godly soul, that if we touch that part of ourselves and tap into that part of ourselves, we can bring about real change. Illuminate our Nefesh Bahamis, not simply train it to be well behaved. And that's Sfira Saimer. Now we saw earlier, Sfira is Miloshin Sapir, right? To illuminate. שהכיח הזה הוא ממחש השבס דווקא, שלמעלה מבחינת מקדש שבקיימה. למעלה מסדר השתלשלוס, beyond the natural order. שזהו הכיח על הבידור. Now, interesting enough, in history, what happened? So there was a revelation of a state completely and totally beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, Yitzias Mitzrayim, which gave us the koyach to do the avodah of Sfir Zaymer, that led ultimately, through the success of that, to the revelation of Matan Torah. The Kamei should be Yitzias Mitzrayim, Hayad Gilu Yisrus Leila Mitzar Atzmo, that just like in Yitzias Mitzrayim, there was a revelation of from above mitzad itself, meaning not as a result of our avodah. L'mayla miseder ishtalshlus, completely beyond the natural order. K'maimer balagoda, like the balagoda, the author of the Agoda says, whoever that is, one of the mysteries of Jewish life. Who wrote the Haggadah? Who put it together? Very old, clearly very old. It's all in Mishnayos and early sugyas in Psachim. So I go, but who actually wrote the Haggadah? Seriously, we don't know. So I say the Bala Haggadah, whoever that is. Ani v'loi malach. It was Uncle Herb in the basement. Don't tell anybody. Ani v'loi malach. Ani v'loi saraf. I and not a malach. I and not a saraf. Another type of malach. Ani v'loi shaliach, me and not a messenger. The Eibishter himself, Shagilu Hayami Bechinas Atzmusu Mahusein Baruch is mamish the Eibishter himself. Shemitzada Shikua, the Rebbe says an amazing thing. Mitzada Shikua Shalem B'memta Sharei Tuma. Because of their being sunk in the 49 gates of Tuma, Hine Im Haya Gilui Me'eze Bechina Shehi. If the revelation was any state of revealed godliness, other than Etzem, Gam B'dargas HaYesher Geveirs, even the highest levels of godly light. Not only would this not necessarily, or wouldn't necessarily redeem them, then the Rebbe says two words that are astounding. Ela adarabba, the opposite. Wow. What can happen, and we see it, what does happen to people who are very sunk in misconception when they encounter godly light? They can turn it into such idiocy that it turns them farther away from the Eibishter. It's the only thing that's going to take them out of that place. Torah mamish. What's Torah? Because Torah is atzmos. Torah is beyond light. What can they do to the light? Completely misconstrue it and turn it into absolute shtus. Which happens all the time. It's astounding. Those two adarabba. It's not enough to bring about redemption. Okay, no, adarabba, the Rebbe says. It'll push them even further into Kalipa. Because they'll take an idea and they'll completely and totally destroy that idea by virtue of their misconceptions based on where they're coming from and what they're looking for. And the and we'll see when we get to Hoid Shebahoid what that's all about and how we can avoid that pitfall. But the basic notion the Rebbe is saying here is when the revelation is beyond Gilui, it's not a function of an experience of something outside of myself, but it's an expression of a connection to the essence of who I am. So then it's not going to express itself in shtus. And what's that? Torah. It has to be rooted in Torah. If it's not rooted in Torah, or if it's rooted in Torah, I think it's rooted in Torah. The person thinks it's rooted in Torah, but what's he looking for in Torah? The spiritual experience as opposed to the truth. Then he'll just turn it into shtus. It could push him farther away from the Rebbe, which is just astounding.
And this is like what we may refer to as inspiration or something. You know.
Yeah, all I'm looking for is the inspiration. Inspiration can be, it's obviously it can be amazing and incredible and wonderful. But it can also, if that's all I'm doing, and I'm just looking for another hit of inspiration and another hit of inspiration, so then, that might actually cause a tremendous amount of waste of time. Because I'll just be looking for it everywhere. Right? And when I find it, the light will blind me. And I'll put my arm around whoever's next to me and dance. The Torah says, don't touch the one on your right. Doesn't matter. I'm so connected. It doesn't work. Right? What? Because it's a she, not a he. That's all. It's not right, left. Just it happens to be. That's all. Right. Stay there. Or it's a he, not a she, depending on who you are. I mean, I know who you are. I mean, the you in the you in the story. Shemitzad shikua shalem, such an amazing line. Right? Ela adoraba, the opposite. A person can take the beauty of Torah and turn it into absolute shtus.
What is shikua literally?
Shikua, sunk. A sheka is a plug. Right? A sheka and a teka is a plug and a socket. Sheka is the socket. The lochen haya gilui atzmus mi atzmusa mahusa inzer baruch hu. What had to be the revelation of Mitzrayim? Because if it weren't a revelation of atzmus, if it were simply a revelation of powerful godly light, what might have happened? The Yidden could have turned that into absolute idiocy and just become a Avodah Zarah. Or who knows what else. What's Avodah Zarah all about? Light. Energy, drawing down, connecting to. Right? It's definitely not about Atzmus, that's for sure. What's the problem with Atzmus? I might not feel it, right? It might not be as inspiring. But what is it? It's real. It's emes lamita, as we've been talking about so much in this minor. It's absolute truth. And in the case of absolute truth, so then I can't go anywhere else. There isn't some different expression of this. It just is what it is. The Eibishter is the Eibishter. How does this all start? So we're going to see when we get to Lag B'Omer. The basis of it all is Hoid Shebahoid. We'll see. When we get there, we'll understand this more. Okay, so let's we can bring about it more there. But that line, Ela Adarab, those two words are astounding. So you need to see his Mitzrayim before. So in our everyday avodah, well, let's keep reading a little bit. The lochein haya gilim atzmusi ein zabaruch she'ein loy shaychus legamli seder ishtaushlos. I can't misinterpret it and turn it into shtus. The zeu pasach havaya. Pasach loshin v'dalei. He skipped, jumped. L'chatchila riber. The Rebbe jumped, meaning there was a revelation of a level completely beyond what we theoretically were able to deal with, or had advanced to such a level that we could deal with. No. In terms of whatever level we could deal with. No, completely beyond that. Jumping, daleg. That's the name of the holiday, Pesach. It's to jump, pass over. What are we passing over? Seder Ishtalshalos. L'maylim mi Seder Ishtalshalos. V'gilu yazeh dafka. Absolute, unadulterated truth that can't be understood in any other way other than the godliness of it. Haya koyach al Sfir Seimer. That was the koyach of Sfir Seimer. The kemeichenu gam shenatnu mitzvahs Sfir Seimer al kol hazmanim kulam. So too, when it's given the mitzvah Sfir Seimer for all of the time, I mean, in between Pesach and Shiur. But interesting enough, we relate to all of time. We relate to the 7 levels of time times 7. When the Rebbe created time, how many levels of time did he create? 7. He created 7 levels of time. There isn't an 8th level of time. There's 7 levels of time. Yom Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Shabbos. So we elevate all of those 7 levels of time, but we elevate them through all of their permutations of 7 times 7. Hine hakoyach al zeh, she'kol mem tes yom, all 49 days, brurim, rectified, zekuchim, purified, v'sapurim, illuminated. What's the koyach to do that? Umimachar seShabbos. Shelamaydim yisei v'yishtalshalos l'gamar. Shagilu yazeh dafka noisim koyach al abira d'Sfir Seimer. It's this that gives the koyach for the bira of Sfir Seimer, rectifying the nefesh b'hamis. V'yidei zeh magim leviani melech hadarav. And through this we come to the 3rd state. Leviani melech hadar. The king brings me into his chambers, which is Matan Torah. Shuin Matan Torah gilu that's musu. That's another gilu yatzmus. In a Veda, what is this? And I'm not flying a flag or saying an advertisement. Just what is this? What's Yitzias Mitzrayim in a Veda? Chassidus. Limit of Chassidus. Yitzias Mitzrayim. Going completely beyond the limitations of physical reality. Dealing with levels of reality that are beyond physical. Which I won't encounter. That doesn't mean that it's not Atzmus. Of course it's Atzmus. Of course, therefore, every din in Shulchan Aruch, every line in Gemara is Atzmus. But how do I know that? I only know that if I learn Chassidus. Otherwise, I'll think I'm stuck in Gashmis. Because I'll be dealing with Gashmis all day long. So I can turn it into something that's somehow self-preserving. Right? This is good for me. It is. Not that it isn't, it is. What is it? What's Yitzias Mitzrayim in a Veda? Limit Chassidus. Learning about those things that are completely transcendent of the reality that we experience all the time, and therefore sensitizing ourselves to the transcendent godliness that is found in everything that we experience between our learning Torah, certainly, our mitzvahs, certainly, but also our everyday involvement in our lamazim. Amazing sikh of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe talks about why Sfir Seimer is the perfect preparation for Matan Torah. What's the ultimate purpose of Matan Torah? The ultimate purpose of Matan Torah is Dir B'Tachtoni. Right? The Rebbe created the world, he wants a Dir B'Tachtoni. He wants a dwelling place in the lower realms. What does that mean? It doesn't mean just that godliness is revealed in the lower realms, which it does mean. Right? But also ultimately means that we come to the state that Avram Avinu talks about, Kel Olam, not Kel Ha-Olam, not the God of the world, but that the world is the Eibishter. The world is godly. The world is a revelation of Eibishter. Ein Oid Milvadei. It's just all Him. That's the ultimate in Dir B'Tachtoni. That's the ultimate in the purpose of creation. What prepares us for that? This is an amazing Sfir Seimer. What's Sfir Seimer? Counting time. We talked about earlier. Turning time into a mitzvah object. So time is not simply the arena in which we can somehow experience godliness and serve God. we turn time, which is a creation, into a davar shebekdusha, into a holy object. Because the mitzvah object of Sfir Zaymer is time. And all time, when I'm counting Eimer, I'm not just elevating that moment that I'm counting. The whole day is a day. We talked about this earlier in the week, last week. The whole day, this day, the 21st day of the Eimer is a chefsa shebekdusha. We're living in a lulav all day. We're living in tefillin all day. Because the whole day is a davar shebekdusha. What does Sfir Zaymer do? Elevates physical time to a state of godliness. So it's not that physical time is where you can find the Eibishter. Physical time is the Eibishter. That's Sfir Zaymer. Such an amazing thing. And that's the preparation for Matan Torah, because the ultimate purpose of Matan Torah is to bring about a Dir B'Tachtenim. A Dir B'Tachtenim is not only the Eibishter is revealed in the world, that we realize the world is Pashat the Eibishter. Ain't it Mavada, it's all him. And the only way I can possibly get there is Mimachar Shabbos. Because otherwise it'll all be about making, which is good, but there's a level beyond it, is making the world a place of somehow godly revelation. Which is good, that's amazing. But there's a level beyond that. It's just all the Eibishter. That's B'chol Drachei De'elu. That means that you can relate to God in everything you do, and not just in the Torah you're learning and the mitzvahs you're doing. Right? It's possible to relate to the whole thing. Is the only place I'll find Eibishter is in Torah and mitzvahs. Now that's where he's obviously most powerfully revealed. Right? Okay. But can I find him in mundane activity? It's the source of that too. Now, it doesn't mean I look for mundane activity as opposed to Torah and mitzvahs. But can my everyday activity as a person navigating Olam Hazeh who doesn't have a rich father-in-law and can't sit and learn Torah all day, every day in Kollel for the next 60 years, can that person have a relationship with God? Yes. His relationship with God can be expressed in every moment that he's involved in his business, in his law, in his work, in whatever it is. When he sees everything as an expression, B'chol Drachei De'elu, and everything he sees the Eibishter. Yeah, that's harder, but that's the ultimate Aveda, and that's the ultimate preparation for the revelation of the fact that that's what it all is. It's all the Eibishter. Or I can just get into it inside itself and say, okay, in the morning I sit and learn, and I learn some. I go to mikvah, I learn some Chassidus. Hopefully someone learns Chassidus won't ever say this, but okay, this can also happen. And then I daven Shachris, and then I learn a little Nigla, and then I'm done with God for a while, and I go to work. Oh, the Ger Rebbe, I think it was the Sfas Emes. At a certain point in Ger, there were some businessmen who were a little too into their business. And he told them, now only a Rebbe can do this. Don't try this at home. All right? He told them, a whole group of guys, he told them they're not allowed to daven until 12 o'clock. They have to daven just before Chatzos, every day. Meaning what? What were they going to be thinking about for the first 4 hours at work every day? I have to daven Shabbos, I have to daven Shabbos, I have to daven Shabbos, I have to daven Shabbos. Now, you and I can't do that to ourselves, but a Rebbe can. We're not going to say the Ger Rebbe lost his connection to Shulchan Aruch and isn't frum. He is. Right? Don't worry about that. He has big shoulders, as they say. So he can do things like that. Right? And he told these Chassidim, you're going to go to work every day. In the first 4 hours of work, all you're going to be thinking about is the Eibishter, because you have to daven Shachris. You have to stop work just in time to daven Shachris right before Chatzos. Right? Because you guys daven a nice early. You go to your mikveh and you daven Shachris, and then you might say over a little vort from the. I mean, the Sfas Emes wouldn't say you say over a little vort from the Sfas Emes, whatever. So you say a little vort from the Chedushay Rim or the Kotzker or whatever you say. Right, and then you go to work, and who do you think about at work?
Work.
We know you don't think about. He's not even there. That's not the way it works, he said to them. So he sent it to work every day before Shacharis. Whoa, that is so wild.
That's wild.
Right? So all morning they had to think, oh my gosh, Shacharis. You know, Mincha Mela, okay. First of all, Mincha in the summer, you don't have to worry about it. Right? In the winter, okay, Seder, before lunch, after lunch. You're going to eat. You might as well have Mincha also. Though Mincha in that sense is something very lofty, and we relate to the specialness of Mincha and the fact that it comes in the middle of all of the craziness of El Mazak. I mean, that's the advantage of Mincha over every other daf. Right? In Yeshiva, that's not the case. In Yeshiva, it's just before lunch or after lunch, depending. Right? Okay. But in, so to speak, the real world, whatever that is. So when you daven mincha, so hey, you have to figure out to stop working and daven mincha. So usually people, when you go to the areas where there's a lot of people working and there are little minyanim there, generally the minyanim take place around lunchtime. Just because anyway, people are stopping, so it's reasonable to stop for mincha also. And it's all over, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. I remember 45 years ago, sitting and listening to it more, 47, 48 years ago, sitting and listening to a shiur of halacha where the Rav was discussing whether or not you have to wear a yarmulke at work. Because in America it was very common, and as he probably remembers in the old days, it was very common that the frum guy would go to work and sit in his office, he'd take off his yarmulke in his office. If he walked out, he'd put it back on and start walking. But in his office, he wears yarmulke. So listen. Now it's completely accepted, Baruch Hashem. Things have changed completely. Now in that same place, in the same law firm or business or whatever it is, where 45 years ago, the guy would get a heter from his rabbi not to wear his yarmulke, there's a minyan for mincha every day in one of the boardrooms. Same place. It's fast. It's completely changed, right? But that was an interesting thing, right? So, you take off your yarmulke in the middle. Work. God's not here? What's yarmulke? Yara Malka. Fear of the king. He's not at their desk at work. Lalacha, there's a heter lalacha because theoretically you need a yarmulke when you walk for Amir. So if you're not walking for Amir, okay, there's heterim. Always, not always, but I mean, there's things you can find a heter for. But say the Frierdiker Rebbe was walking around the yeshiva once with the Rosh Yeshiva, and he went into a room, and there was a young man in bed, and his yarmulke was on the table next to him. So he said, Frierdiker Rebbe asked him, "Why aren't you wearing your yarmulke?" He said, "I don't need it when I sleep." Then he noticed there was no negelvasa. So he said, well, why don't you have negelvasa next to your bed? He said, well, the whole room is nechshav kedaled ames. The whole room is considered one daled ames, and you're not allowed to walk daled ames before negelvasa, but the whole room is one daled ames, and there's a sink over there with a kvart, so I can walk over to the sink and wash my hands. Okay. I asked him one other question. Tzitzis. Right, his tzitzis were also hanging up. So where's your tzitzis? He said, loves man tzitzisud. Lila's loves man tzitzisud. You have to wear tzitzisud, right? So then they walked out of the room, and they were walking in this. The Rebbe asked, the Rosh Yeshiva was showing him around. The Yeshiva said, how much Torah do you have to know before you don't have to do anything? That was his question. If I really know a lot, then I shouldn't have to do anything. I just, I figured out how I'm putter from. Now, it is true that you're not wearing a four-corner garment. You don't have to wear tzitzis. That's true, la'alacha. There's no question, right? How many frum Jews walk around without a four-corner garment, though? Right? That was Rav Meisha's famous tshuva about Eretz Yisrael, which, a lot of people took took issue. They just asked the question. Rav Meisha said that there's an interesting question whether or not there's a mitzvah. Well, b'chlal, it's a machlekes rishonim whether or not there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael or not. Right? Is Yishuv ha'aretz a mitzvah? So the Rambam says no, and the Ramban says yes. The Rambam says living in Eretz Yisrael is so general, since all mitzvahs are dependent on that Right? If you learn the Torah, you can't really keep the Torah unless you're in Eretz Yisrael because there's so many mitzvahs that are shaykh to Eretz Yisrael. So Yishuvim are living in Eretz Yisrael is not a mitzvah per se. Right? Because it encompasses so many mitzvahs. There's so many mitzvahs you can't do if you're not in Eretz Yisrael. And the Ramban says, no, there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So then someone asked Rav Moshe, so then what about, is there a mitzvah to move to Eretz Yisrael? That's an interesting question. If I'm in Eretz Yisrael, I'm being Mekayim a mitzvah. But is there a mitzvah to move from somewhere else to Eretz Yisrael in order to be Mekayim that mitzvah? Or no? So the mashal that Rav Moshe brought was tzitzis. There's two different types of mitzvahs. And there's mitzvahs that you perform by virtue of being in a particular situation, and there's mitzvahs that exist regardless of your situation. The fact that it's day means you have to put on tefillah. Okay. But tzitzis are different. You're only obligated to wear tzitzis if you're wearing a four-corner garment. If you're not wearing a four-corner garment, then you're not chayav to wear tzitzis. It's called a mitzvah kiyumas. Right? Okay. So Rav Moshe said that therefore living in Eretz Yisrael is like a mitzvah kiyumas. You're only fulfilling the mitzvah if you're there, but you don't have to be there. So then what question did a lot of people ask? But everybody wears tzitzis, right? Everybody puts on a four-corner garment, so why don't we relate to it the same way? Okay, that's an interesting question. It's a different question. Obviously, the religious Zionist likes that question a lot on that Rav Moshe, right? Because their religious position is that everybody has to move to Eretz Yisrael, whereas most of the religious community doesn't think that that's necessarily a religious obligation. Depends who you are, what you are, where you are. Right? Okay. But it's an interesting question. Okay, let's read one more line of the mimer. Machras Shabbos. Powerfully aware of a level beyond Seder Ishtalshelus, in order that our involvement in Seder Ishtalshelus is completely different. If all I think there's Seder Ishtalshelus, so then I'll deal with Seder Ishtalshelus in a different way. V'zeu gamkein, let's just see where we're going, and we'll see it tomorrow morning. V'zeu gamkein ha'shayches de lag ba'emer laveda de svirsa. Now, I know Lag B'Omer means the 33rd day of the Yom Seder, but why is that day Lag B'Omer, which is the Yemi Lul of the Rashbi? Why is that Shaykh to Sfir Eimer? Why did the passing of the Rashbi, which was the day when the Rashbi revealed the highest level of Torah that was ever revealed, the secrets of the secrets, which is how he explained what happened and how the people there, he gathered a few of his most precious students and said things that had never been revealed at any other time, and said, today I'm revealing things that have never been revealed before. So we'll I think what we'll do when we finish this mimer is we'll learn. Because I'm leaving Sunday, there'll be Chassidus Monday, so I won't be here. So for the few days after we finish this, so we'll see a mimer that discusses what happened on Lag B'Omer. But Lag B'Omer is this unbelievably special day. But why does it have to be the 33rd day of the Yomer? Why couldn't it be in the middle of Kislev? What's it got to do with the Yomer? The Rashbi. For Chassidim, what's Lag B'Omer? Rashbi. I mean, it's become for the whole Jewish world. Right? La Halacha, so Lag B'Omer is that place where, on a certain level, the restriction, according to some positions, the restrictions of Omer stop because the students of Rabbi Kiva stopped passing away. Right? So there's definitely that, and we do get married on Lag B'Omer. People get married on that day. Some people will keep getting married after. Different positions as to how you relate to Sfira. When does Sfira start? When does it end? Okay? Some have it start later and end later. Some have it start earlier, end earlier. Some have it start earlier, end later. Of course, that's what we do, right? It's just the way the Bible is. But okay. But Lemaisa, if you ask the Jewish world what's Lag B'Omer about, what do they say? Rashbi. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen anymore because of the horrible events that happened a few years ago. But the Rashbi is the only one who has a koyach mashicha, who has a power of drawing, that he gets 500,000 people to his kever on his Yom Yilula. He's the only one. No one's close. 500,000 people go to Meron every year. Now it's limited because But I mean, it used to be half. I mean, that's why.
What those are the tracks?
500,000 people know. I mean, like if the Rebbe were here in Eretz Israel, so maybe because there's a lot of Jews here, but the Tachlis, no, right? No. And it's very nice that 25,000 people go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, so that's impressive. It's not 500,000. The Rashbi, and now the Rebbe Kiva's here, right? Rebbe Kiva's buried here, right? The Rambam's here. Rabbi Yechon Zakkai's here. They're all here. I mean, not all. There's a lot of people here that if that's what you want to do, you could find the kever. Rashbi. Amazing. That's like Banger. So what's that got to do with Sphere Semer? Why is that so sharp to Sphere Semer? Right? I mean, it could happen anytime. Well, obviously, it happened on the 33rd day of the Yom Beseder. I get it, but why? Why Emer? Okay, let's see.
Did Rabbi Akiva's students, did they stop passing away on level one and then stop continue? I thought they would continue to pass away once